Hello and welcome to the Armorer's Store video series on the inspection, maintenance, and repair of reels. This is part 3 of our 4-part series on this particular subject. Before you watch this segment though, I would encourage you to have watched part 1, which goes over the basics of the reels and how we inspect and test and some basic safety items upon those reels. Part 3 focuses on what we call the turtle reel. This is a flat reel. The majority of them are manufactured by the Uhlmann company. However, Allstar also makes one. The difference in the two is Uhlmann's are blue and Allstar are red. As I said before, this is a flat reel, has one spring, not 3. If you watched part 2 and we discussed how a 3-spring stacked reel set works, then you'll understand that this only has one spring. It works basically the same way. As you extend the cable out, it winds the spring, stores energy in the spring. As it goes back, it releases. To work on this reel is a little more complicated than the turtle reel, or the upright reel, if we showed you on the previous one. Again, what you'll need to work on this one is your electric screwdriver, your special socket tool, and a set of wrenches. To take this off, of course, you put the turtle on its backside and you remove 4 screws, which are the large cheesehead screws. Take all 4 of those out. Now, as I'm taking this apart, I will say that this one is a lot more complicated than the other 2 styles of reels in order to take apart. Yes, you have 4 screws to take this apart, but when you flip it over to remove the lid, it does have one feature that is very good, because if you'll notice on the inside, the lid is ribbed. What that does is that gives you places where you can take your sets of screws as you take it apart and put them in. This particular reel only uses, it has the 3 lines that we are normally associated with, A, B, and C. This one, however, only connections that are made to the cable are the B and the C line that go here, that feed through this switch. Now, this switch is what's called a Mercatac. It's a mercury wetted switch, which in reality is actually a high-speed signal switch designed to operate at over 10,000 RPMs. However, this particular use has been adapted to it and is quite effective. The wires will connect internally to the switch and then run through this tube to your connections on the back. Now, as I said, this switch only has 2 connections. So the third, which is the ground, will connect to this stud in the middle, and it connects to the spool itself. Now, the spool itself will then go through the internal spindle, and as we take this apart, we'll show you what that is on the inside. And then it connects down through the back to the spring, which is located in this black section here, and then connects to the case by this screw, which then will connect to the ground wires on your C line on the internal. Okay, so one of the things we need to do, again, as we pointed out in the second part, is to remove the tension. Now, in order to do that, you have to remove this segment. If you watch the basic portion, or part 1, you'll know that this is the one that tends to wear, and but it also contains or holds the rest of the cable and the connector. In order to do that, you flip it over and you have 2 screws. Now, this second screw is partially obscured by the foot. you have two choices. You can either remove the foot, right, which if you take a pair of pliers you can do that, or you can actually back out this particular screw in order to do that. So we'll do that right now. Again, using one of our other compartments to put the two in. And yes, I'm using a magnetized screw, which helps. Okay, now that we've got that done, we remove this cap, and again we're going to have to remove one more item, which are the two screws that hold the cable guide in. Now this one is definitely, you're going to have to remove this foot in order to do that. If you notice, if you can see, this one's been cut so that it can actually fit in there. Again, at this point I am not going to go ahead and release the tension on this, but when you take this off, then you can release the tension and then you can work on the items. To replace the cable on this one, you have to desolder these two connections and also the one on the inside, which makes it a little difficult. In order to do that, you're going to have to pull this off, and you do that by these three screws here. Okay. When you're troubleshooting this particular one, if for a broken line, if your wires are good, if you've got good connection between here and these connections, then you're going to have to go ahead and connect, take a jumper or your ohm meter and put it in the appropriate connection, the AB line on this end, and then test through the middle of the Mercatac, the center or the outer edge, which is where your connections will be. Another problem that you can have with these two is that sometimes these wires within this rubber booted area will come loose. One of the issues that you also have with this is that dirt gets up inside of it. Every once in a while you want to take the lid off and take a vacuum cleaner and go ahead and remove a lot of the dirt and wire or stuff that comes off the wires as it moves back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back together. And again, if you watch part one, we did the segment on the repair of the cable guides and the segments, and in order to do that you're going to have to take the connector itself off. Let's get these. All right, so we got that back in place. I'm going to show you how to work on the connector at this point. So again, we take out some cable, we put a quick loop in it, and let that come back. For this one, you're also going to need your tape in order to be able to put on the back side to keep all your nuts in place. Now, remove this boot off the end of the connector, slide it back, and now you have your 6 nuts that you have to remove. One point is that after a while this connector wire will break through. If you're ever called out to strip for a clip, very easy repair. Take your electric screwdriver out with you, go ahead, and all you have to do is just back that out. Pull it off, replace your connector, and then put it back together. And as you can see, this is fairly simple to go ahead and take that apart. Once you get all those done, go ahead and pull off the connector. Okay, so the inside is pretty much like the previous one in section 1, or correction in part 2. You have your strain relief knot, and this one happens to be held in place with two other screws. So you would remove those, and again, this also has the tabs, the solder tabs on the inside. Now, if you notice, so down on the bottom, away from you, again, in order to do this, you're going to need your special tool to hold the socket, and then your wrench in order to get, and I believe this is 7mm. No, try 8. Okay, so this is an 8mm nut, and you just go ahead and loosen that up, take it out, and then solder. The reason why you want to do that is twofold. Number one is the fact that in order to get enough heat to melt the solder, you're going to be heating up the socket also. And also that could possibly damage the material around it. So you want to pull that out and then do it separately. Again, this has two pieces of protective tubing, a thicker one and a thinner one, that both go in and get tied into the knot. Okay, putting it back together is very simple, same thing, just reverse the order. And again, the techniques that you would use for this are very, very similar to what you would use to working on a body cord in terms of determining where the breaks are and pulling out the wire to get the depth of that. The other thing to work on this, and because we can't at this particular junction take the release the tension on the spring, I will show you where and how this works. Okay, and don't forget your cap. Put it back in place, and that's how you take the connector apart on that one. Remove your tape, take your knot out, and move them back in. Okay, so if you take the turtle over and you flip it on its back, as I said before, this particular screw is where your ground connection comes through to the base plate and then will connect into your C line. And you can see that by that little metal tab that is right there that connects into your C connection. This one is a ground hole for connecting to the piece, a metal piece, to ground it out. Not really recommended that you use this one. You go ahead, I would recommend that you go ahead and use the grounding connection on the score machine to it. One of the things that can happen is that this block can come loose, which would cause an intermittent on your ground here. The other thing is that these three screws here, where you connect into the big metal spindle on the inside, is where the ground path goes through. Sometimes those will come loose and you'll have a problem. The other problem that you have is as you go through from the connections and through this and through the bottom, is where, like I said, it connects through because the spring connects to the spindle, and then the other end of the spring is captured down on this end. In order to remove the spring, you remove all four screws. Underneath, there is a plastic plate that sits over top of it. The way that this is connected into the spindle is by means of a slot. Now, at that slot, again, this has the same problem. If this spindle goes backwards and you crimp back on the spring, you could break that. It's very difficult for you to repair that. As I pointed out in the second segment, you can anneal the spring with a lot of heat and then try to retemper it, but it's a weak point and it will probably break later on. Sometimes you have enough material left over that you can fit it into the slot, and over time it will wrap itself around the spindle. It's a good temporary fix until such time as you can get a new spring. When you do get a new spring, it will come in a pack all by itself, and you can just slip that end over the slot in the end of the spindle and then reconnect to the ground on this end, and then put everything back together. Again, when you're putting this one together, once you have the tension off of it, I usually put about 11 turns on this to retension this particular item. So we'll go ahead and put it back together. Flip it over. Set your 4 screws in. And again, this is probably the most common type of reel that is out there today. There are various different ways of taping it down to the floor. If you refer to my book, The Care and Feeding of All Things Fencing, you will see a couple of examples of how that can be done. There are some modifications that we at the national level have made to this to make it a little easier to tape down. However, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to stay, so they all need to be redone occasionally, checked, make sure they don't go walking down the strip. And that is the turtle reel. Thank you for watching. Ask you to visit our website at www.thearmorerstore.com, and thank you for watching this segment.